Call the January 12th meeting to order at 7:07. If we could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Willard, if you can get those students to start saying that, that would be great, since we haven't had that in a while. Okay, so approval of agenda, we are not moving anything, we are not changing anything, everything is staying as is. I will entertain the approval of minutes.
Jacob Murray, I move to approve the December 8th minutes.
Tony Holt, second.
Any discussion on this? The one thing that I did notice was that Sophia just needs to have a PH instead of an F in her first name. And I think that was all that I had. Anyone else? Looks like we're good. Okay, so then we will do, since it's only Jacob and myself in here, so we will start off with Jacob.
Aye.
Then we'll go to Jen.
Aye.
Tony,
Aye.
Griffin. Griffin's muted, but she said aye. Sophia,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Laura,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Are approved as is with the change of Sophia's correct spelling of her name. So we will move on to public participation at this time. Obviously, there's no one in the room, so anyone online can raise their hand. If you could please say your name and address for the record, and you will have 2 minutes to share your thoughts. And there's only hand, so I will make sure that no one's having a hard time. See, you had the timer ready.
I did.
Okay, I will close out the public participation and we will move on to correspondence. Jacob?
Right, like correspondence today, and we had an email sharing the Surgeon General's recently issued advisory on youth mental health with the board. An email expressing concerns over the CIAC's COVID mitigation policies, and requesting that a survey on mask wearing be conducted by the winter season. An email sharing information about the CT Grown for CT Kids grant that the district could apply for. An email asking if the district is considering a remote learning option for January or a remote learning period for January. An email sharing an article about current challenges facing educators. An email expressing concern over the lack of discussion regarding student performance. The author believes that this is critical to evaluating the success of educational programs. Expressing frustration that his child has to quarantine after a close contact with a COVID positive case. Despite testing negative, the author asks that this policy be revisited. That's it.
Okay, at this time, I will open it up for points of information for any board member who would like to do so. Please raise your hand, or you can just let me know, and we will go from there. Okay, Laura?
Hey, guys. I just wanted to bring up the last email that was just sent in regarding the quarantines. I thought the schools were no longer doing contact tracing and that a close contact would not be quarantined. So maybe this was an error that we can get back to the parent on, or if there are situations where a child could be quarantined despite testing negative, I'd like to know what those are.
Okay. Did you want? Or do you want to wait?
Sure, you want to do
Yeah,
that?
go ahead.
So I haven't really looked at that carefully to see the details of the situation, but out of school close contacts are still quarantined out of school for 5 days, returning on the 6th day. So the quarantine periods were reduced, but if you are an out of school close contact of someone who was positive, the student is still, in that case, out of school quarantine.
The health district, or would they hear that from the school nurse?
They would hear that from both, but in the case that it was reported to the school district, which it is, CHHD will send us the the notifications. When we get it from one of two places, either the EHHD or the parent guardian themselves. And then we reach out, and obviously do the communication we have to with the parent guardian, send them all. But that is still part of the requirements of the DPH CDC.
Turn it down.
Out of school contacts get that out of school quarantine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go to Tony.
Yeah, I was just with the town council's decision last night to go full remote versus hybrid. My understanding is that town hall, so will we still be allowed to maintain the hybrid status that we're doing?
There's no reason right now for us not to, in terms of rules.
Correct, because I know that Jones had put out something on Tolland Open that looked as though we received a letter about going remote, and I did ask Dr. Willett if he had received anything, because I had not.
Yeah.
And he said that he actually checked with her that it's not affecting the board to have our hybrid meetings.
Right.
So, but once again, we didn't actually get a letter like had Steve had written.
And what is it? I'm not gonna use the right term, but the multiplier, there's the 700-page bill has in it the stipulation that allows.
The
us-
implementer?
Implementer, thank you. Well, what does it call it? The multiplier, the implementer. Pages, they keep multiplying. That allows us to continue to do this. Nothing has overridden that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other members at this time? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our student representatives. Do we have Emily available? I didn't see. I'm not pulling up Emily,
Let's see her.
so they might both. So I wish those ladies well, and we will move forward, but if they happen to pop on, then we will go back to them. So at this point, we have our superintendent's reports, starting us off with our monthly financial. Don't worry, people, we will get to the budget. Everyone's excited.
Right. So as is typical protocol, the first meeting of the month is the superintendent's report. I'll go over some of the highlights of it. It's accompanied, as you can see, in the share on the screen here, with a letter from the business manager, right now with an available balance of 278,423, or 0.68% of the DOE's current budget. Along with the packet, and if you're able to download that at home, you can blow it up a bit. On the screen, it's going to be a little bit small here. Expand it, at home, so you can get a better picture, better eyes view of that. So some of the highlights here for the month: salaries, code 110, are currently over budget by about 213,000 due to the additional staff that we added as part of what we expect to be reimbursed for. The teachers, both at VGP, it's K in grade 1. Also, for some of the numbers that we haven't fully been paid back for, some of the ESY stuff that we still have not received the payment for. Substitute, and then we do expect that sometime in the next couple of months. The grant is finished and complete. Everything has been submitted, so we're just in a process of waiting. Substitutes, which is about code 120, I believe, available balance of 202. We're still incurring that. That's where we're at. We're just going to be continuing to incur that, especially now. Our use of substitutes has gone up dramatically, as you might imagine. So we'll see that getting spent down. Overtime expenses cannot be encumbered. Currently, they're under budget at 78, but we do expect to incur those. Stipends, as we've talked about in the past, over by 59. We still have pay-to-play funds. We keep collecting those all the way to the end. It does ultimately balance out. Health insurance, severance, employee benefits, codes 210, I think it's 200 or 190, 200, 210. are collectively under budget overall, but that's, we're still going through the year, so we will see health insurance incurred, severance incurred, benefits incurred. Newly hired employees and retired employees will continue to drive the FICA Med, Social Security, so on, go to 220. So you'll see that go down. The available balance is I think 58 and should remain under for a little while. Retirement, reimbursement, unemployment, 240, 250, 260, collectively still 115 under. But you're going to see that continue to go down as you know, we're not really through the year yet. Benefits, workers' comp, things like that, 270, 310. That's where we want to be right now. Legal, audit, tech services, 343, 50. All collectively under about 149 through December. That'll continue to be incurred as the year goes on, as you know. Maintenance, custodial, cleaning, equipment, technical, that's 420, 430. Will continue to be spent as the year progresses. Transportation, 510 is over budget, 333. Most in-district routes have been created and established for first student. And, special ed, we use Haven Transportation as well. Our special education services basically are the main reason for that running over at this point, and also see that into next year. Special ed tuitions over as well from last year when services were curtailed by the service providers. Now the services are back to work through students' situations and get them back up to speed. So the tuitions that we would normally be paying are now higher as those organizations struggle to maintain their obligations. So that's going to be over by about 600,000, and that does happen in special education if you have those fluctuations. Energy 620. As you know, we have the Universal Internal Service Fund, or utility internal. And we transfer that at the beginning, about 1.4 million. Textbooks, about 6 textbooks in line, 640. Curriculum coordinators are planning the expenditures on that, and you'll see that get reduced fairly quickly in the next couple of months. Instructional supplies, equipment, miscellaneous supplies, general supplies, I think that's 600, 610, 690, 730. Are collectively under budget. Throughout the year, not all of it has been incurred yet as of December. So December is kind of our somewhat midpoint of the year, and you'll see these continue to go down as the year progresses. And that's roughly that in a nutshell.
Go ahead, Jacob.
You got your attention immediately. So just a quick question about substitutes. I know we expect that number to go down, especially this people getting sick, but with all the absences lately, do we expect to be over budget with substitutes this year? Do you think that's possible?
I think we're going to expend it. I hope that we're not going to be over. I don't think we'll be over, partially because the subs are sick too.
That's true.
So we're doing a lot. Again, this is speaking to the efforts of our staff. They've done an incredible job. They're stepping up even in cases where those kinds of things are happening. Admin are in classrooms, others are making it work. So I think we're probably going to be expending quite a bit of it. I'm hopeful that we're not going to be over.
Okay.
Got it?
Yep.
Okay. Tony?
Excuse me, my question's on the transportation. I know with the continuing challenges that we're having as far as the busing and the to and from the school, are we seeing any additional charges or any relief on that line item due to those efforts?
Well, when we were back last year, we actually weren't running the routes at all. Right now, we're not seeing a tremendous opportunity for savings, although we do have a cycle, and we will be talking with first student. The vast majority of the buses are running, even though we have at times the combining of routes is because someone is unavailable to drive the bus. It doesn't mean, and then that bus just has to do more driving. So there's still an expense involved, because now you have, a fewer drivers, but more space to cover for that one driver. So it's not so much that, we're saving the way we were, say, a year ago. A year ago, that bus wouldn't be running at all. You may recall right after the last year winter school holiday, we did shut down, went remote for a few weeks. In that case, to use that as an example, the buses weren't running at all. So while we do expect to have some potential, opportunities in that conversation will be occurring, it won't be anything like it was.
No. And I wouldn't expect it to be, similar to what we had when the buses weren't running. And I'm going to show a little bit of ignorance here, but I'm assuming Y number of miles, and there's a formula that says how many buses should be taking care of that. And if on a daily basis we're having to combine routes and increase the amount of times kids are sitting on those buses, that charge wouldn't be the same. That at some point there should be a fiscal response to the challenges that we're having to put up with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I was just looking at something myself, but I think I'm good. Any other questions? Okay, we can move on to the highlight of the night.
All right. Give me 1 sec, just to do that up. All right, so what I'm going to do is load it up on the screen as well. People at home, you're going to have access to this tonight after the meeting. It'll be posted on the budget page. Right now, the one that you're seeing is visible through Zoom, but it will be posted. But it looks exactly like this, and it'll be posted before I leave the conference room tonight when we're done. Just as a general timeline, we do the superintendent's budget first in the budget process. Typically, we do have a couple of meetings prior. COVID kind of put a crimp in some of the stuff that we do normally. We are going to be having next Wednesday a Board of Education that will give the Board of Education an opportunity to kind of look at the document that they're getting tonight, digest it, submit some questions. As you know, board members, the Board of Ed dashboard does have a link for board members to submit Q&A. And the overall website also has, in the budget section, on superintendent's page, there is a link for budget. And you also, right across the top of the central office site, and clicking on that, there's a Q&A area. You can submit questions as well from the public. Board of Ed, obviously, those questions right now during the deliberation process, as you develop your Board of Ed budget, will get priority as we go through it right now. So Board of Ed members, in the dashboard at the top, there is the budget Q&A question link. You just click on that to submit your questions. The board will be looking at this budget, and next week on Wednesday, we'll have an activity with present, as well as other cost center managers, and the board will have an opportunity to rotate through and talk to these individuals, ask questions, and so on, followed by a community workshop. So after the board's meeting, there is a community workshop that starts where community members also get the opportunity to have a presentation and then walk around and ask the individual cost centers and administrators questions in their mind with respect to the budget. So tonight is largely just an overview, providing the document, giving people an opportunity to take a very quick look at it. And then over the next few days, really digest it, submit questions, and next week, go through the process of getting in depth, drilling down deeper with some of their questions. About 1 month from now, the Board of Ed publishes through me its own board budget and adopts it. to adopt it, and it goes to the town. So in this span of a month, it goes from superintendent budget to board budget. So basically, a quick just set of the numbers. The superintendent's budget this year is an increase of 4.94%. The budget this year is doing basically four things. It's responding to the adjustments. There were bargaining unit negotiations. They were good negotiations. The Board of Ed in Tolland did very well. Kudos to the negotiation team. But it is in that span of getting into the second, third year of the contract, and sometimes those are the higher ones, in some cases. So about 50% of this budget, 50% of this increase, about 2.some% is bargaining unit increase. It's contractual increase. So about 2% of that, I'm going to say 50% of the overall increase is that. In addition to that, the transportation is another about 15%. So when you combine the two, about 65% of the increase is made up in those bargaining unit increases and special education transportation. So you'll notice that when you get into it, the line 380 in the object code, about 53,000 is our typical transportation expense. About 300,000+ is special education transportation. So that's for next, that's going into the next year. So between those two items, that's about 65 to 70% of the increase right there. Right off the bat, it's made up of the bargaining units and the transportation. Then you add in a couple of other things wanting to do. The tech initiative, it is now going to be going into the 2023 year. I know it's hard to believe, but it was a few years ago we were talking about the technology initiative in Chromebooks. We did submit a plan that showed that there would be a replacement cycle, and at the time, 2023 seemed pretty far away. But fiscal year 23 is upon us, and that is when we incur the Chromebook replacements in the cycle. And so you'll notice the budget is also comprised of those replacement items to the tune of about say 50,000 for a grade. Probably cumulatively the technology stuff is getting into the $150,000 to $200,000 zone overall when you include everything. But a big chunk of that is devices for the educational technology initiative. So when you take now, you're into the almost 70 to 80+% of the increase. And the tech services line, which I'll go into greater detail over the next few weeks, examples of, kind of restoring some of the things that were a part of the budget that were made as investments, and they helped offset some things. Those things are coming back around now. Those subscriptions are ending. So as an example, one of the math programs, like it's up by about 56,000 off the top of my head. But if you look at the year prior, the line was something like 96, now it's 105. So the increase is really comparatively 9, but it looks like it's 50,000 because the subscriptions that we pre-invested in are now ending. And so those, those purchases now hit the line, whereas we had a year or two where they weren't hitting pre-invested. So really this budget, the vast majority of this increase is actually made up of bargaining unit increase, the transportation, special education, and instructional equipment, and the and some of the pre-investments coming due and having to then have them come back into the budget. Those are the four major driving factors. As you look into the budget document, you'll see that there are some positions that were included in the budget this year. And overall, FTEs as a total, when you start to peruse it, you'll notice that overall FTEs went down in the budget, but that we are adding positions. So some of the stuff that we funded by grant. we've been very successful in doing that for the district. But you will see, now that we're picking up some new mandates, that we do have to try to hire some staff in order to cover that. So one of the other, just want to load it up, the computer's running horribly slow, so give me 1 second.
I saw it online earlier, the different things, and I'm not finding it, I'm not finding it. So
Yeah, it's going really, really slow here. I'm trying to get it.
I saw it online. Oh, it exists.
So I apologize, because this is really not going very fast, but, okay,
So
so,
page 18 is the one that has the personnel and staffing.
okay, so I'm just gonna go about it a different way. So as you scroll through, I'm not gonna read every page of the document, but when you do get this at home, you can click on a section and it will jump to, to these sections for you. So the positions that were included for this year are the 0.6 facilities worker. Right now, we have for years had too few people on our facilities team. And we have a kind of an opportunity. There's a possibility of a person working. So we can get a real benefit by a FTE 0.6 add. We'd be able to bring on a new person into the district to do it. Now, these individuals for us have been utilized extremely, well. They're very talented. They have certifications of their own, electrician, master key, things like that. So by having facility staff, we do not have to as much on bringing in outside vendors to take care of things. So we've gotten a great value for many, many years out of the 3 staff that we've had. And this would make that staff size about 3.6 overall rather than 4 because of the way we'd be able to work it, though we would have 4 human beings working rather than 3. So for a 0.6 add, which is fairly modest overall, we would be able to increase our facilities effectiveness and probably do a cost avoidance that would make up for that position easily. So keeping in mind that, really it is a cost avoidance piece and that the individuals that are doing that job right now are overwhelmed. We have all of these facilities and 3 people coming in to do repairs and fixes and maintenance. Custodians don't do that kind of thing. It's actually a very good investment to make, and it will likely provide avoidance for us. And it's an opportunity right now because we would have 4 individuals working in the district with a 0.6 add to that. Another position that is part of the budget is a social studies teacher. The state of Connecticut did pass a law some time ago, and I do talk about this a bit in the narrative. Essentially, the law is for a Black and Latino U.S. history class. So all districts must have classes offered to students, and we are now offering that class next year. It's in the course catalog in compliance with the law, and of course, welcoming it. So Public Act 1912 was the Connecticut CGS Act that brought that to be. And, we are looking to hire a social studies teacher to be able to teach the sections of that. If we don't, the problem is, the challenge that we face is that right social studies classes that the high school, the students at the high school really love. This will be another class that I'm sure they really love. But we would have to pull teachers off the classes that are there now. So we would lose some of the courses we're offering to the high school if we don't make this adjustment. And it is a state mandate that this is done and offered. Again, it's welcome. But the point is that, we would like to be able to do that without curtailing the other offerings that people have come to really appreciate as well. So there is a social studies position in there. Also, there is a school counselor. Now, during this time, there's been one very, very consistent theme of students needing the assistance of, social emotional support. And School, as you might recall, some years ago, I acquired a grant, and I taught a class to help get that established. That grant ran for about 2 years, and at this point, now we would be adding this position. So FTE wise, again, if you notice overall, we're not going up, we're actually going down because we've shifted some grants and positions, but this position now would go, would come on to the operating budget, equate to another FTE because it was already there, but it'll be shifting it from the grant that was paying for it, into the operating. There is a tremendous amount of support for this position. The position also does teach the class that I used to teach when it started. And when we do our rotation activity, one of the things I'd encourage you to do is when you are talking to the middle school where this position would be focused, ask about the need, because the middle school will be able to talk very, very extensively about the need for the position at that level. That position has been there, it's crucial, and the continued need is extremely clear. Probably one of the most clear things in the entire district right now is the need for that. And if desired, during that rotation time, we can even figure out a way, and if that doesn't happen there, I can share some information with you from the counseling department itself. They've provided about how desperately that position is needed to continue. So that is why that is in the budget. Finally, TMS, THS math teacher / numeracy coach. One of the areas that the state of Connecticut has identified across the board as in need after the pandemic is the math and math support, and we've been providing it. But there is a need right now for creating a bridge from TMS to THS, and also provide opportunities training to make this individual a numeracy coach to help train kids, but also teachers. This position would allow us to continue our work with pathways as well, because they could pick up part of a role in the future establishment of one of the pathways that we're trying to build. Currently, we will have a business pathway for next year. The course catalog will have an engineering pathway for next year, the STEAM pathway as well. That'll be part of the course catalog. And this position would not only be providing teaching support, but also help us continue to work and develop the pathways, which has been a long time objective of the district that's being actualized now, even though we are in the pandemic. So essentially, in addition to those big chunks of the budget that have nothing to do with staff, bringing on these staff, out kind of how we got to the 4.94. We're well into 4 even without these staff added. But this staff is important for the district in a variety of ways. And so, I debated a number of times, what level of budget to bring you, but I thought it was important to make the argument and to set forth to the board the staff that we feel is needed. You may recall about a month provide a H4 budget update, and that H4 budget update did include the staff that were being asked for. There was a tremendous number of staff on that list, and out of all of that came really essentially these 3: social studies counselor and math, education positions, and then that 0.6 facilities. So to round that out, that's essentially what comprises the vast majority of the budget request. Anecdotally, there's a lot of data in here to give some perspective. So I'm not going to go page per page. I just wanted to give you a basic overview tonight, give you a chance to really look at it and digest it. But overall, rest assured that your staff are very hardworking, and the contracts we have with the staff were very fair contracts, very fair compensation levels. We are not abusing our per pupil expenditure. We remain one of the lowest in the state, currently in the 4th quartile. Our budget averages, if you look at our 5-year and 9-year average, we're averaging about 0.74% for 5 years and about 1.5% for 9. If you consider that a maintenance budget is about 2.5% to 3, those budgets have, we've been going for quite some time, maximizing resources and, getting a very good overall for, for all the energy, time that and blood, sweat and tears that you're all putting in. So it's, from a budget average standpoint, we're doing quite well for both the 5 and 9 year averages. In general, the class sizes in this budget, it maintains what I would consider to be reasonable class sizes. And overall, this budget, as has the budgets over the last few years, has made the appropriate for for the enrollments that have changed over the years. And so this budget is no different. We have made an enrollment adjustment, budget adjustment for that, an FTE adjustment for that. So now we are really at a place where, we're not going to be shrinking. You're going to be looking at about the same enrollment now for many years, and then it will start to climb, then it'll start climbing in the lower grades level. And that level is expected to go up in the next 10 years. So you'll see now we're going to stabilize, and you'll even start adding positions again, or adding students, and start going up again in those levels, pre-K, K, 1, 2, and beyond, as they start to cycle back up into the system. So those adjustments have been made. So essentially that's it. The rest of the information is peruse and chew on. Grants, you're going to notice a very large difference in grants because the way that the grants are kind of falling in. You'll notice if you go back a couple of years that the grants were at a lower level than they are today. And you'll notice how a spike in grants sort of came about. Some of that is because of grants that we have developed and sought as part of our partnerships, like the academic and social support. But most profoundly, you'll notice how ESSER, and those grants, ARP came in. There's quite a large up, and then you'll see it dipping way back down again into the 100,000. Some of that may fall into next year, so it may not be as low as I think on the state side, 100. But the reason it has such a dip is that most ARP, ESSER, ARP, and things like that came in. They're getting incurred in these years, and they're not what you would typically see for grants. It's not it's not your typical grant situation. So you'll see grants stabilizing again, and you'll see those figures start to stabilize. So you may look at some of those figures on the grant page and look at it a little bit with alarm, but that's really just because of how they're falling. So for instance, state grants at 171 down 1. Well, the 761 had a lot to do with the ESSERs, when they were incurred, how they were incurred, and so on. And that ARP ESSER, it may fall into, and will probably fall into next year a little bit. So when we start reporting it next year, some of it would have been dropped in this year. Some of it may get incurred into, into next year in grants. But the grants fund those grant positions. They're not part of the operating budget. And when the time comes that those retirements will hopefully allow us to, keep those FTE while not having to lay people off. Hopefully that will be how that plays. But those positions do ultimately end when our ESSER ends. So it's just a matter of where that was reported. And so it falls into that line, which makes that line look, huge for say this year, and then, dropping massively for next and state grants. That's just because of the ESSER situation. And some of the other from this budget to Board of Ed budget will be adapted. And so that's basically the general overview of the budget given to the board for you to digest and start to come up with questions, and then we'll do the rotation activity next Wednesday.
Well, I'll start off with questions if you're ready for them.
I'll write them down and answer what I can.
I thought the social studies teacher and the school counselor, that was a grant, but it was one person. Now we're splitting it off into two.
No, it's still one person.
Oh, it's still one.
Yeah,
Okay.
social
So
studies is
saying
at
it.
the, to clarify, the social studies position is at the high school. And it's to cover the sections that will be created for US BLH.
Okay, because the way that you said it, it sounded like you were talking about two different people, and I knew it was one. So I wanted clarification on that. And
Yeah.
then
But the kind of position that was who's doing it right now, like the counselor also has a social studies
That's-
certification, so that's how it
That's
gets a
how
little
we're
confusing.
doing it, yeah.
But the person in the middle school is a counselor who is also doing our skills for adolescents, but her cert is counseling and social studies.
Oh, so you're
Different
saying
from the
that
high
this is
school
The middle
position.
school, and now this is the high school.
Correct. So the
Needs to
position at the
have-
middle school is just, continuing that counselor and having that counselor teach SFA, but it's a position we would have to pull onto our property.
Okay, my next question, when you were talking about the staffing and personnel on page 18, we're down 3.1, but yet you're saying that we're adding things, so, and then you're talking about 0.6, and I'm not seeing a 0.6 for, because wouldn't that fall under district-wide personnel, and it's only 0.4 on here? But 0.6 of the,
Yeah, it's because what we know is going to occur next year in terms of the people that, what their working arrangements they desire them to be. So we know that the ad is going to be about a 0.6, but when you look at the FTE, I'll have to break down the FTE, in a narrative for you in the Q&A doc, because you'll notice that even though we're adding positions, FTE goes down. And that's because of positions that move over to grants, even though we still do have some, to some extent, a few fewer grant positions. We did move some positions out of operating budget into grant. So that's why you'll see overall FTE kind of going down from the operating, even though we're putting positions in or trying to in the superintendent's proposed budget. FTE in terms of the number of employees is lower than it was this year. But I'll create a articulation of that.
yeah, because I would love to see just.
Yeah.
exactly what we're talking about. When you were talking about it, I'm looking at this and it wasn't matching, like I just was confused, so. Okay. So that would be good a breakdown of that. Those were my questions for right now, but
All right, I got a couple too. And a comment. So my first question about that social studies position at the high school is, do you have an idea about how many, about what enrollment might be for that Black and Latino history class at this point? I'm just curious.
It's in the course catalog, like, as we speak, as we come into the registration period. We know that there's interest in the course. I would project about 3 sections.
Okay.
2 to 3 sections, The issue is that, your typical class load for students is about 4. Typically, teachers would teach about 4, depending on the situation. And so, what will happen if we can't do that is we would have to reduce the other offerings. So there's only so many teachers to go around for the sections that we offer. Something would have to be taken away in order to do that. So if we don't have that, we'll have to reduce some of the other offerings.
Okay. I just asked because, for a class that we haven't had before, I would like to just kind of have an idea what the interest would be up in that class. My second question is I know we talked a little bit about a grant program for personal finance. I know grants they work differently with regular budget. Would that still be something in here? Is there anything for that or?
I'm looking for that.
Okay.
Originally, I had that position in here, but the state may be mandating that position in a year or two. And when they do that, they might put some grants on the table to help people achieve it.
Okay.
And so because it's not mandated yet, but the US history one is mandated. I put the US for this year for 1912. And I figured I would get it, work on getting a grant or something to help fund that position. Now, my hope is somewhere between now and the end of the year, I might be able to figure, to get something.
Yeah.
But I'm just not sure.
Okay. We can follow up that conversation later, I think then. And I guess just a couple comments. I'm just thinking about the one-to-one replacement FFC should definitely have a more in-depth discussion about other ways to fund that. I have a little bit of trouble with it being in the operating budget. I know it's something we've talked about discussing for a little bit, and maybe this is a good time to dive deeper into that. And then just a general feeling overall. This is not a judgment on the budget overall per se. I like to read through the entire thing, but I don't know pass that referendum at almost 5%. That's just my blunt feeling. I get, a lot of this is contractual, but that's just that's just my thought. When I see this, I'm going to read through it and give it fair read. I just want to put that out there as my thought. That's all I have for now.
The technology was one of the things I had written up there too. Yeah, let's go to Griffin.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Dr. Willett, for putting this together. I know it's no easy feat, especially hopefully coming out of the pandemic. I'm probably gonna have a million more questions, but I'm gonna just start with a handful for right now. I'm gonna have to put together my my one-page budget summary with numbers for myself. But here are my couple. Kind of what Jacob said about technology. Is there, I don't see it in here, but maybe I'm just missing it. Do you have the exact number for what is actually the one-to-one? Because I'm kind of in agreement with Jacob that I think we're going to have to definitely look at some other options for funding some of that. So do we have that exact number?
I'm gonna say, I think it's in the zone of 206,000, something like that. 50,000, I think, roughly is ninth grade. I have to go back and look at and pull that to get the exact figure, but it's in that range of the 100 to 200,000. And I put those in the operating budget because the plan that was put out a few years ago had the renewal cycle in there, and part of that plan was to do operating, but I left it up to FRC at other options that we have discussed. We have discussed a few other options. So that's just an area that the FRC can chew on, and make a decision about. But there is, for instance, the ERF does allow for technology. One of the three things the ERF can be used for is technology. So that would be something, you could use it for this year, but it may not, in perpetuity, it may not be an effective means.
I know we have definitely discussed that. So, okay, we'll just have to, I think, revisit that a little bit. My second question, I've been a big proponent of some changes at the high school for the math program. Can you give me a little bit more details about that? Is that a teacher, or is it just a consulting kind of thing?
No, it's a certified teacher. Would be using to teach classes and to help do the work for the math curriculum and classwork that we were looking to do with respect to providing more supports and more options for courses, especially at the high school. But what we would like to do with the position is perhaps, have it so that it's teaching 75% of the time and maybe 25% of the time, train the individual to be a numeracy coach, because things that, when we do onboarding for new staff and we bring people, into the district, and when we're doing refresher trainings, we do have to contract for those. We were thinking that maybe this position and the training, could be used to help this position help us provide those trainings and onboarding. And one of the things the district has been looking at is how can we optimize, when we bring new people into the district, ready. And we do a good job of that, but I think we could do a better job. This would be one of the ways that 75% teaching load, maybe 25% as a coach, we could have them help us do that kind of thing and offset some, do some cost avoidance.
Would this person be looking at the curriculum? Because I know that that's been a slow moving process with the curriculum supervisor, at least just for the high school. I know that kind of been able to tackle that? Will this person be assisting in working on the high school curriculum then?
The focus of this position is TMS THS. So it's that bridge. It's that period, that group, that population, that area of focus. And yes, also, there's been a lot of heavy lifting making a transition from an old antiquated program to a new one. And so bridges and so on have been, and this year are, continuing to put the final touches on. I know that the high school is a major area of focus for our supervisor. She's already started a lot of work there and will be continuing to focus on that next year. So I think, between this position and other efforts being made, we're going to see a lot of great things happening at the high school. And again, it's a great high school, a lot of everybody, the employees are wonderful. This is just an opportunity to bring the focus in there, and I think that everyone's looking forward to that.
Okay, no, that sounds good. Just kind of also then what Jacob was saying about the new social studies teacher, history teacher at the high school. Have we considered combining, because the Black and Latino history class by state mandate is only a 1 credit class, is that correct?
I think it's got the same in any other social studies class.
Okay, I think the earlier stuff I had read had said that it was a 1 credit class, because I think I had read a couple of things or spoken to a couple of people that some school districts were maybe going to make it a half-year class, but we obviously can't do that with our block scheduling. But my question really is, can we perhaps consider combining the class with the existing Native American social studies elective and make it a Black, Latino, and Native American class, and perhaps combining that, since that elective already exists, it just would maybe kind of alleviate having to have a whole nother position, but yet it would still allow for the social studies electives to not be changed, because I know you had said that you didn't want it to obviously take away any existing electives. I'm just not sure if that's something that was considered.
Yeah. From a resource standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. The thing is that those are two very different classes with 2 very different content and curriculum. And the state does identify as also part of our PPRs, when we talk about at the end of the year, there used to be called performance, profile and performance review reports and PPRs, I believe. They changed the name of them. That's why I'm struggling for it. But basically, we have for a long time identified our Native American class as one of the things we do to be responsive, as a district. And it does have a very different curriculum than the U.S. Black and Latino history course. That's by design, and people typically do generally see them as quite different. So we probably would not be in a position to combine them. And the curriculum that came from the state and one of the CERC, which is one of the regional education centers, which I can share and post online. It's a very rich, very well-developed curriculum. Our district did utilize it as an example, as we were encouraged to do, and all the districts were encouraged to do by the state, to make that course viable. And we obviously have Tolland tweaks, but I can post that, and people that are curious can look and see. It is extremely involved. So it would not be, it would not allow those 2 courses to have their full optimal, development for students if they were combined, and they haven't recommended that. But it makes sense from I understand the question. It makes sense certainly from a resource kind of point of view, but they are very different courses.
Okay, thank you. Okay, those are really the only specific questions I have. I think that we'll probably go a little bit more in depth in FFC, definitely, and kind of look at the numbers. I do have some concerns. I'm just going to be honest right now about a 4.84% increase. I think that it's going to be a little bit difficult. There's a lot going on now, just inflation in general, the cost of goods and services, and so I think we've got to perhaps be a little creative with some have to see if we can get everything the students need. But I think we might have to get a little creative. So that's all I wanted to say for now. Thank you.
I'm just going to follow up with a couple of questions too. I was looking at the appendix F. I know this is something that we definitely talk to about every every budget season, but when we start talking about the furniture and fixtures, that's going up 100. Is that something that FFC can look at? Because I think that that was definitely something that Griffin had talked about in the past to see if we can move some of that into capital expenses versus the operating.
You certainly, the Educational Reserve Fund certainly provides us with an opportunity under the areas of special education, capital, and so that is definitely something the FFC, could probably utilize. The thing about it is that the trouble that you run into is that when we do take one of those things down, generally the next year, it looks like a much higher leap. And so if you take a look at some point, if we can walk around, if one of you or a couple of you want to walk around and look at the middle school, for instance, the furniture is in some of these places. Like Birch Grove obviously will have fantastic furniture because it was part of the project, but many of these other buildings do not. And so, we would, understandably, those are areas I think, we could kind of work creatively on.
Yeah.
But whenever we do that, we lower it for the coming year. And when we do have to make, that part of the budget again, it looks like a massive leap up. These things come to haunt us, kind of like in some ways they are now. So we just have to do that with a mindset towards what will this look like next year, because eventually we won't be able to draw from that. And I have been in places where all these areas have been whittled down, and it's extremely hard for a board to climb out of that. It happens over a span of many years, not just one. So we just have to watch that carefully.
Yeah, no, that was just one of the things, but I just saw that it was hard for you.
Of course, no, and it's good. These are good
For
questions.
the 564 line with the tuition agency within state, what exactly did that comprise of again?
Well, 560, 61, and 64 actually are a
64.
combination of a number of special education things that generally are tuition. They're a combination of services in district that we spend on special education, as well as is some tuition lines. Had those shift a little bit in the last few years. So what I'd like to do is, rather than go in and kind of give you an answer like straight out right now, that would take a little while, and there'd be moments of silence while I looked at it, because those have shifted a little bit. I can give you a rundown on 560, 561, and 564 in the Q&A if you want.
That would be awesome. These are just ones that, like, as I'm going through the have stuff.
Yeah.
But the other question I had was, which pathway the budget? Because I know that you had said that the engineering.
Yep, the two that are part of what we're looking to do next year as we continue on this process are the business and the engineering. And engineering is basically STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, math. It's a STEAM pathway, and some people, STEM was what they used to call it. Now it's STEAM because you add the CAD and like the creative. But it would be our engineering pathway. The courses will be laid out in the course catalog. You'll see it because we are moving forward with that, but it is part of what this budget supports.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
And it's part of the board's objectives and endeavors.
I believe, Jaden, you had your hand up. You want to?
Yeah, I did, and then I took it down because I didn't think I had a question anymore, but I'll go for it. Thank you. So Dr. Willett, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I just have a quick question regarding the social and emotional welfare aspect of it all. And you were on the call with the town council last night where the mental health and substance abuse task force had submitted their report, just determining what they thought was needed Jacob, Madhu, Becky, they all did a fantastic job. And I'm just curious if any of the information taken from or used in creating this budget, if sort of where the information's coming from. So whether that's specifically from staff or whether it's state guided, if that question sort of makes sense. And if moving forward, if the recommendations of the abuse task force can be sort of used toward building this budget up or picking it apart or whatever. That's sort of my only question right now. I'm just curious where that's sort of coming from.
Yeah. Well, you know, this year I tried to keep the narrative to about a page or a little over a page. Last year's budget had about 3 or 4 pages of narrative. And I did go into in greater depth some of the research around SEL and things like that. I can post that separately, but for a few years now, there's been an increasing need for social, emotional, psychological counseling assistance in schools. This is even pre-pandemic, and the pandemic just magnified those needs. So, you know, you'll see some of the links that are in that document online. If you click on them, they bring you to research that does talk about it. But you know, there has been a profound increase in need, and it already was high before. You know, ideations, students suffering, families struggling, particularly in anxiety, particularly in depression. And so, you know, we do really need to continue to pay very close attention to it. That position was brought in a few years ago by grant. It was needed then. It's even more needed now. I was willing to teach, you know, 90 children for a whole semester to get that on the table because I knew how important it was, and I would hate to see it go. It is mirrored by the mental health task force. The things that they've learned about in town and what they're speaking to and trying to do, it's all part of the same effort we're making, both school and community, to try to address this almost mental health pandemic on its own, and you know, try to help turn this in a better direction for the community, for the kids, and for the families, the adults. So you know, it is for that reason. There's more research on it that I've published in the past and I could put out there. I did copy some of it into this document. And the counselors and school psychologists, when I meet with them, and I meet with them quarterly, they continually speak to the need and how much they're seeing, how many people are coming seeking help, both adults and kids. They're overwhelmed. So at some point, in instructional rounds with the counseling and social work staff, I think that would be very, very useful for the board. Maybe in the process, even in the next few weeks, as you go from superintendent to board budget. But that is probably one of the most important and widely known needs, both in school and in community.
Just building off that and building off of what the last sentence you just said. So out of you know, the 4 main points you gave us at the beginning of this, that's sort of a star sort of in the middle of it all, is at least I know for a couple of us on this board, is that is a big, you know, big star is social and emotional, if I can get my words out, social and emotional well-being of students. Out of the 4 of those, I mean, that is a big part of your 2022-2023 budget.
Yes, definitely.
That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jaden. At this time, does any other board member have any other questions? I got my questions rolling here, so we
Good. And that's, once again, the Board of Ed dashboard, you know, you look at the top, it has the Q&A, so just start rolling them in. We'll get them going. And I appreciate the board's efforts. It's a hard time. I know it's, you know, it's 4.994 actually. It is something that, you know, I know we have to chew on, and I appreciate the board's efforts in that process.
Thank you for putting it together, because I know that that's not an easy feat, especially with everything else going on in our district. So thank you. So that brings you to the Corona efforts.
Right. So just get this over to that. too far. Okay. So H3 tonight is the coronavirus efforts district plan review. Many of you may recall that we do have a pandemic plan, and sorry, this is blocking that. So, some people sometimes say, where is each school has a banner that flashes. The banner is the Pandemic Continuity of Learning Program. When we click on the banner, it does come up with the page that is available to the community. This particular page is just kind of blown up so you can see it. But it has protocols, it has the reporting links, it's got the COVID data and information, supporting materials, information about alternatives, masking, activity registrations, all of these things, technology help. One of the things that that has been required by the federal and state government is that the school have a safe return to in-person instruction and continuity of services plan. Some of you may think that in my love for acronyms, I'm trying to torture everyone with this long name, but this name is actually required as part of the has this specific name. As part of this document that was reviewed originally about 6 months ago, there is a process that it does articulate the various aspects of what the district is doing, who the contacts are, what the universal masking and other provisions are, what are the laws and the CDC and DPH guidelines, what are the CIAC guidelines, what are the guidelines, what are the COVID checklist, medical checklist items, screening items. And one of the provisions is that we publicly put it out there like we're doing tonight, at iterations of about, I believe it's every 6 months. So I'm looking for the dates, and we canceled the meeting in December. So this is our meeting where we are once again putting it out there to the public, reminding the public where this document is. And if they have any questions, they can always put them in public participation or send me an email through contact. And I'm happy to help in any way that I can. So the review dates that I was trying to find here are as follows. So you should be able to see them on your screen. Originally, it was in June. This is the December 22 one. We're just doing it in January. We will be looking at it again in June, then again of 2022, and then again in June of 2023. I think we all hope that the last time we ever have to look at any of this would be tonight. And if we had to, June of 2022. But these dates, these iterations are specified somewhat loosely, but they are about every 6 months apart that we look at and talk about the plan. It turns out tonight that we have some very new aspects to the plan. That the state of Connecticut and DPH and CIAC have recently changed. So when they changed their guidance, at the back of the plan, you'll see there is a section for updates. And so generally when we update the plan, and most of the time the updates are reflecting something that has changed in CDC, you'll see that those changes are then reflected in the updates page, which is the last page. It's the appendix, what is it, S7? Yeah, it's S7 of the document. So the most recent changes for us have to do with the quarantine period for students who are in school close contacts and out of school close contacts. CDC's rules. The sports rules are the most recent change, which is everybody masks all the time. Unvaccinated kids, if they are close contacts, are out for 10 days off the sport. But if you are vaccinated and not symptomatic, you can continue to play. And if you are vaccinated and somehow COVID positive or symptomatic, it's a 5-day versus a 10. So sports changed in that way. Really, the guidance has been heading in the more permissive direction. So boards of ed now, when you do have to subject a student to a quarantine period because something happened outside of school, that is now a 5-day quarantine with a 6-day return. And it used to be 10 with an 11th day return. So that's good news. For in-school close contact school situation, we no longer do contact tracing. We're no longer required to do contact tracing as of the 31st. So it took about 2.5 hours to complete a contact trace for every child who was COVID positive. That energy that was spent doing that has now been shifted to maintaining staff levels. It was a good thing that changed when it did, because Omicron hit us pretty hard. The number of identifications for positives went up exponentially under Omicron. However, the general reports about Omicron is that it tends to be, especially for vaccinated and boosted, very mild. In general terms, it is much more effective, but it also seems to be less severe. So, the CDC seemed to take that into account, and that's why it reduced the quarantine. Very fast burn. It seems to clear faster. More people get sick, but they get through it, more quickly. So that's why they adjusted everything and they took away the need to contact trace. We do still have to report though. So even though we don't do all the contact tracing, the two major challenges right now are that because it's so effective and because there is a 5-day period of quarantine, even if you're symptomatic, until you can get a negative test, you are put into a mandatory quarantine. So that has caused staffing challenges. The infectivity and the quarantining has caused staffing challenges. So the energy that we were using on contact tracing has shifted to making sure that we have enough staff in school. The state of Connecticut, as you I think are well aware, provided masks and kits. So far, I picked up from Demas the eye health testing kits and distributed them to our nurses. They're currently being used as they were specified for the students. We're working in cooperation with the town. I think John Lytell's been amazing. He's done a great job. We've been working in collaboration to get things done. He's also doing these great distributions for the community. And so, as part of that partnership, we did have access to some testing prior, and the state of Connecticut has given us some additional tests, and we're able to use those for staff. Currently, how we're using those tests is workforce maintenance. If somebody is sick and needs a test, we will help them get it. We don't hand them out to just everybody, because if you don't need it, it could be used for somebody who does need it. If somebody's symptomatic, the difference between them returning to work and not returning to work is that they can get a test, because you have to start counting the quarantine days from the date of the positive test. You can also count from the date of symptoms, but typically you're counting from the date of the positive test. So if I feel a little verklempt tonight, for instance, if I can't get access to a test for 4 days, I'm out for those 4 days, then I get a test. If I'm positive, I'm out for 5 days past that. Whereas if I'm feeling a little verklempt and I go take the test tonight, start my count tonight. And that helps us keep people healthy. It also helps us keep the workforce going. So those tests are used for those staff who need it. And we don't have enough to distribute it to everyone willy-nilly. So we use those tests for those staff who are in a position of need. So right now, that effort is really shifted to keeping our staff able to continue to serve our students. Staff are 3 reasons. They're either COVID positive, they are symptomatic, or they have childcare challenges because their district has put the children out, and they need to find somewhere to serve or to have childcare, and their own childcare options are limited. Either their parents are sick or the places have been closed due to close contacts. So basically, those three are creating quite a bit of struggles, not only for this district, but other districts. And so, we are every day continuing to work very hard, providing testing. I provided testing in my office. I give it to them to take it home. Try to make it as easy as possible to get that tested to return to work as soon as they can. And they are doing a fantastic job under very difficult circumstances. And that is all staff, custodians, secretaries, paras, admin, teachers, nurses are just doing an incredible job. So we're keeping things rolling. The new reporting, you may notice that I used to put out a message that would say something to the effect that two students were positive and 18, 20, 30, 40, 50 kids are identified as close contacts. We don't do and are not asked to do or required to do the contact tracing anymore. So now what we do out on the page, you'll see there is a link. I'll take a step back so people can see it again. It is click here for an update on COVID identification numbers. But that's also included in the superintendent's bulletin and will be every week. But if you can't find it there, click that flashing banner I showed you before. Click this option. It's right at the top, and it will bring you to the page that shows you the identifications per grade and total for the school. People may look at this and say, my gosh, look at that. There's quite a few. However, the thing to keep in mind is that these identifications are both in and out of school identifications. Whereas before you were getting in school ones because I didn't always know the out of school ones. Now we know them. They're coming to us faster. So we have most of that information. And so this is a combination of information I received from the Eastern Highland and from our own parent guardians and internal source, identifications. So this is combining, you're getting all of the identifications that we are made aware of and what grades they came in. So this, this is how we show the community, the status of the identifications. And, it'll grow through, obviously the next couple of weeks and months, and you'll get we did not used to see 20 in a day. That was not what we were seeing back in December. But again, or November, but again, that also was looking more like the Delta. Omicron is definitely showing itself to be much more contagious. But again, it is not demonstrating itself to be impactful. It's not as severe. So that again is why the DPH and CDC, you may look at this and say, why and how could they have brought it down in the number of quarantine days when it looks like numbers are up? And their reasoning is that it does not appear to be causing severe outcomes, even though it is more effective. So that's essentially where we are in a nutshell. A number of information documents have been sent to the community. We also have put out and evolved the decision tree. So parents, guardians who are trying to, well, of course tonight it will not be able to be reached. But normally when you click on that, you'll see that it's a resource for community members, for parent guardians, and it can help you with the decision about what to do. It points you in the direction of what to do if your child is positive, what to do if your child's a close contact, what to do if someone in your family is sick. And it tries to help you, point you to the right resources. And if you need any additional assistance, I think many people know I will respond to you. If you click the contact page, if it's an urgent matter, you can text me and I will get back to you. If it's not urgent, obviously reach out to my office and we will connect within a day or two. If you send an email, I may not see it for quite a few days. So that's why email is great for some things. But if you have an urgent question related to this, submitting to the COVID line, reaching out to me directly, these are ways to get what you need. So that's essentially where we are.
Okay, any board members have any questions? Couple. Okay, go ahead, Jacob.
Okay, so my first question was, I was just looking back at the minutes back in June when we first were presented with this plan. I noticed we had to vote on it. Do we need to vote on it tonight to renew it, or is this?
No, our obligation is to continue to give the public an opportunity to see it
Okay,
and to provide feedback. That's the obligation. So for instance, public session, public participation, they can provide feedback or send us feedback, but we need to make this
public thing.
public in
Yeah.
those iterations.
Okay. And as far as the content of it goes, I think they're moving in the right direction slowly. It's not a whole lot we can do, at least in this document. We don't have a whole lot of flexibility with it. I guess my only thing is, over the next 6 months, just looking out towards the end of the year where we have bigger events like prom or graduation. I know that those have just been some hot button issues up in the past. If COVID looks like it's going to interfere with those plans, I was just wondering, even though it doesn't necessarily say it up in this plan, if we could try to have some of those plans presented, or at least discussed at board level or in some more public way earlier, just so that there's a bit more of a chance for the community to opine on that. Thinking about over as I look 6 months down the road and before we review this document again. So that's all I have to say.
I mean, with the direction things are headed, I would be surprised if in a month or two from now, the picture doesn't look dramatically different.
Mhm.
The governor's office did seem to indicate, although I have no crystal ball, that some of the mandates after February may not actually be there. So I think we're looking at a very different spring than
Yeah.
we have been looking at, and that's primarily because I think they're going to change the guidance significantly. And if I'm being extremely frank, I think that the number of people that will be now naturally, have the natural antibodies and so on, will be significant.
Yeah.
So I think spring, you'll have a much different looking picture than we did.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree, Omicron is a different beast for sure, but we'll find out when we find out. That's it.
That's it. Okay, so let's go to our online board members. So up from the top, Griffin.
Thank you. Dr. Willett, I'm still trying to understand the out of school requirement. So if a child is contact traced out of school, who's doing that?
So that can happen through either the parent guardian reaching out to us themselves. So they might say, we were at a pizza party at, Walt's Pizza House, and it turns out that the so-and-so was positive, and my child is not vaccinated, and that's how that would happen. That would be an out-of-school contact, and then would be out of school for the 5 days from that point of contact. They could also test back, and we do take, we take any test now, but they would be out for the 5 days. You have to wait the 5 days, and then they would come back after that quarantine period if it happens at a venue that is outside of the school.
So how, I guess my concern more is then, if that happens and tells you, then are our nurses contact tracing within the class? Because I know you still have to read the email we got, but it seems like a student from an outside trace was contacted by our nurses. So I guess that's where I'm confused. So what is our nurses' involvement with the contact tracing if an outside person, if a person tests positive, but not in a school setting?
The contact tracing was when, it was a more extensive thing than what they're doing now. Right now, they have to act on what they are informed about. So the EHHD, for instance, the one way that it can happen is when a parent guardian calls in and tells us about it. Another way is that each day I get a series from the health district. When I get those contacts, I have to send those contacts. I send it to a spreadsheet that we use to keep track of it. That spreadsheet is accessed by the nurses and other staff that we have working on it. And so if the health district makes us aware, we have to act on that.
Okay, so we do have to contact trace if we hear from the health district. So we're not totally off the hook with contact tracing. The health district is expecting us aware of an out of school positive case.
It's tough. The terminology is confusing, but we are not off the hook for reaching out and enforcing close contacts and COVID positive quarantine periods. Contact tracing is more like we would have to call every one of that family's list, reach out to all of them, reach out to any sports, any outside activities, reach out to all the teachers, find out anyone that they were within 3 feet for more than 15 minutes or 6 feet for more than 15 minutes if they were in, such and such place. So what we used to do for contact tracing was much more extensive. But so when I hear the term contact tracing, I think of the 2.5 hours per child that we had to do. We get contacted by the health district. They give us the names. We reach out to those people. We don't go reaching out asking for them to make lists for us. And that's really the difference. We're being told who we need to reach out to. Either the parent guardians themselves are sharing that, or the health district is sharing that. So we're reacting to the information we receive, whereas when we were contact tracing, we were actively interviewing lists of people that we then had to add to lists, et cetera.
Okay, all right, I understand now. I think I get it. So yeah, I think in this particular situation, the person who was positive must have named, if you will, their close contacts, and then the school was required to say they can't come to school for 5 days. So, but you'll read the email. Maybe you could actually send the board the update on this particular situation as to how this did get is out of school for the 5 days. So that would just be great, because I think the email was a little confusing, and I'm hoping that will actually change soon, as far as out of school close contacts will be treated the same as in school close contacts. So that's all I had. Thank you.
And just the only thing about anything that identifies a student, I have to be quite careful about in my response. So my response will probably be directly to the parent, but I can scenarios for the board and try to explain it through, kind of a scenario-based type thing. That decision tree does talk a little bit about how it works. If people click on that, you get a general sense of how it works. But I'm happy to articulate in person one-to-one about any details anyone wants to ask about.
Thank
As long
you.
as it's confidentiality, that's it.
Okay, let's move to
Yeah, I was just wondering, since we are not doing the contact tracing within the school environment, why the students, at least in, I believe, K through 8, are still having assigned seats at lunch?
Well, so the difference, and again, it's this terminology, which is making us all a little, exasperated. We are still responsible for making reasonable mitigations, masks, trying to create reasonable spacing, making sure that we know if there was a positive, we still have to know in general terms, if they say, here I was at this table, we have to respond to it. So each school responsible for keeping in place mitigating strategies. And at any time, we might be asked to defend our mitigating strategies. And because lunches are one of the most vulnerable places, and they're identified as one of the most vulnerable places because kids naturally have to take off their masks to eat, there is an expectation that we keep some level of mitigations in those places. So we have been at kind of thing with respect to what are you doing? We have to have a good answer for that for the authorities, or that can have undesirable consequences. So, people will note that we still enforce masking. There will still be mitigating strategies in lunches. We'll still, be doing things that, that require sanitization, sports, things like that, rules that we have to enforce. People that come to school events will still be asked to put their masks on. They can't, wander around the school without it. All of these types of things still remain things that we're responsible for. And if we do not follow through with those responsibilities, it has negative outcomes for the district overall. So, people will see that that is still part of the process until some of these mandates are lifted. Different in March.
Yeah, I guess that was going to be my follow-up. Like, do we see maybe, obviously I understand, the need for physical safety, of course, but that is always with a balance of, my very strong opinions on social emotional health. And given that, lunch is really one of the only times that our children have to socialize during the day, and especially in the older years when there is no recess, and in the younger years during the again inside the classroom. I just think it's important, obviously these years can be hard for some students, and students end up in situations where they're no longer friends with people that they're at the table with, or they weren't there on the day that they assigned seats. And I know it seems like small potatoes, but to some kids it's not. And I do hear from a lot of parents, that their kids have ended up in these situations, that had to have, kind of special things to have movement and whatnot. And so I do think that maybe some of these assigned seats maybe are lasting longer. Like maybe there should be a quicker rotation where children can switch it up. But again, I totally understand, our need for safety first, but I just hope it's something that we always pay attention to and keep on the table, because I do believe that that time is important for our kids, especially right now.
And it makes sense what you're saying. I think a lot of us want to see that shift and change. I am hopeful that March will show to be a very different situation for the schools. I do feel hopeful about March.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's do floor next.
Did you just?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I 100% agree with Jen on the lunches. Thank you for bringing that up. I know lunch is a vulnerable spot. However, if you think about when you take your mask off, it's usually with your own family. So I'm sure some of the kids could be eating lunch with someone that's in their inner circle, instead of somebody that's not in their inner circle. I would agree on moving towards allowing kids to have that time. A couple things from last night. I was listening to EHHD, and school transmission is less than 5%. And I guess, I can agree that that's a lot having to do with the mitigating factors. But at the same time, we need to move towards an endemic. And if, for those of you that don't, a disease we live with every day instead of a pandemic. And so in order to move out of this, the contact tracing has stopped within the schools. So even just looking at the decision tree and the flow chart, making a report of COVID, to me is contact tracing. And I feel that we are overstepping our bounds. And in listening to the EHHD last night, I took some notes, the school cases and contacts identified and reported by the health district. So if that's what they're doing, but yet they're calling us, it's kind of hypocritical, if that makes sense. I just think that it's time that we move forward. and that we don't discriminate against one kid versus the other, regardless of vaccine status. If this is endemic, to move forward, the kids have to be in school, and there's no reason why this healthy child that we got an email about who's tested negative 3 times needs to be out of school. It's unacceptable. Sorry, I meant to say that with a smile on my face. It's just, I'm very passionate about it and my hair's on fire right now. So thank you.
Okay, let's move to Sophia.
Thank you. I want to, when we are looking at the number of identifications, are we including teachers that have tested positive in that number?
No.
Like, are we keeping track of, I know we're keeping track of our student population and how many positives we have per school, per grade, but are we doing that with teachers at all?
Yeah, yes, we can't help. I do have that. I deal with that constantly, 24 hours, 7 days a week at the moment. And so, yes, I do know exactly who they are and so on. That is a privacy issue for the teachers. And we do district reporting to the state. I am admittedly going to need to spend, the weekend catching it up because I didn't use so I have to spend quite a bit of time this weekend catching us up on our reporting. But when I report to the state, I do report, all of them. The one that's on that spreadsheet there, that is students and school related with respect to students. So there, and that's the vast majority. And I do, but the state, we do report all of it, and it is going to be catch us up. We're just not used to this much.
I was just curious, is there a greater uptick in the positive rates in the teachers as opposed to the students right now, just because of the age difference? I was just wondering what the effect of the virus is on our teachers.
Well, the teaching population as adults is pretty much, mirror the general population. Our mitigations in schools have helped us successfully not make schools major super spreaders, but about 25 to 33.8% of people that are vaccinated will get, at least that was the data from, I don't know, a little while ago, that it is about, I think it was reflected last night by Mr. Miller, that it's it still remains to be about 30-some% of people that are vaccinated to be infected and come back positive. And I would say that's about right. That is kind of what we're seeing. But the problem that we face is not just the people that are coming back positive. We have to treat anyone who's symptomatic as a potential positive until we know that they're not. And so from a workforce standpoint, that's a real bugaboo. So like right now, tonight, if I felt a little, whatever, under the weather, I can get tested to say that I am not COVID positive, I would have to be out of work for the next 5 days, or until I can get a negative test. Geez, I'm starting to feel a little. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So basically, that's why testing is so important for us for workforce considerations, because it's not just people that that 30% might be positive, is symptomatic. And the challenge we face right now is that this is literally the time of year where everybody gets sick. The norovirus is going around, the general cold is going around, the flu is going around. So the chances on any given day that someone feels like they have a sore throat, sniffles, the headache, as you might imagine, that's pretty frequent. And with a staff, in the 400 range, 400 plus, you do get every day, if even 10% of them are having any kind of issue, that's 41 people we have to deal with. It's that's what's really posing the challenge. So I would say we're running pretty much the same for people that get positive. It's just that as a workforce consideration for quarantine, It's the positives, it's the symptomatics, and it's the childcare. And those three things are like the perfect storm. So that's really kind of what's impacting all this.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I think that we are all set with these questions so that we can move on to the committee and liaison reports. Let's see, I know communications met and has. So Jen?
Yep. So yeah, we had our first meeting on 12/9. Seems like forever ago now. We discussed posting a short meeting summary to the superintendent's Facebook page, along with our meeting minutes, in the hopes that the community that's unable to attend board meetings can get a glimpse of our discussions and then dive deeper into the meeting minutes if they choose, and which will hopefully inspire more communication to us from the community. We also discussed a cross communication between the Board of Ed and the PTOs. We would provide a short Board of Ed summary monthly to our school PTOs to be shared in their monthly meetings. And we would share some of their info, such as their upcoming fundraisers and events or hot topics at our meetings. This is so that we can help each other reach a larger audience and give parents hopefully more of an opportunity to receive information and to also become involved in any way that they can. So having said that, we have some updates to share. TEPTO is doing a fundraiser called Spreading Kindness, One Sign at a Time. This is where parents can order and pick up blank lawn signs for $10 each, which families can then decorate at home with a kind word or phrase and then return them to school. And all the signs are going to be displayed on March 1st at both Birch Grove and TIS. So orders for this are due on the 21st of January. There's a couple dates, and the order form is available in the TEPTO newsletter, which is on their website. And it will also be disseminated through Classroom Room Parents, Digital Backpack, and through social media pages. So for any additional questions on that, just contact PTO President Bethany Lesko. And then TMS PTO is gearing up to do their annual Munson's Chocolate fundraiser from 2/21 to 3/10 with an April pickup, time for Mother's Day. They're also looking into doing some PTO events, and that information will be shared once those dates are booked. They're also beginning to discuss end of year 8th grade promotion activities and are in true need of more parent volunteers. As we all know, fundraising and event planning gets tougher as the years go on. And of course, the pandemic only exacerbated this. So any time or energy anyone is willing to spare would be greatly appreciated. And you can contact Mary Rose Dubrick for that, or if you have any other questions. School Booster Club has a bottle and clothing drive scheduled at THS on 3/26. So stay tuned for more information on that as we get closer. And there is also an immediate need there for volunteers at this time. Specifically, they need to find someone who would be willing to spearhead their annual Eagle Scramble golf tournament. That's in September. So please contact Dawn Gaylord if you're interested or you have any questions. And then there's also a fundraiser being down in support of AJ, who is a 3rd grade student at TIS who is currently battling cancer. AJ Strong bracelets are being sold in both youth and adult sizes for $5 each, with all of the proceeds going directly to AJ's family to support them with their costs as AJ undergoes treatment in both Massachusetts and Connecticut. So if you'd like to purchase a bracelet, you can contact Jody Rose at jodyrose23, JODIEROSE @gmail.com. So for all of the PTO information that I said, their contact information can be found on their website pages, which are all linked through our school websites. But if you have any trouble finding anything at all, just contact me and I'll point you in the right direction. That's all I have.
Well, that was a lot, so thank you. Let's move on to the mental health.
Yeah, a couple of meetings. Yeah, and they relate to us actually. So, and maybe Jaden wants to jump in here too, but we met with Bruce Watt, who's the director of the Recreation Department in Tolland. The initial discussion was about creating a teen center, but it's kind of expanded beyond that to perhaps also modifying some of the programs that we have to try to increase their level of participation. And a couple of ideas that might concern the board. Survey, have the rec department work with the Tolland Public Schools to create a survey and send it out to students to figure out what activities might gauge their interest. And also another idea that Bruce had mentioned that I'm kind of excited about, I think Jaden's excited about it too, would be creating a team board to help plan some of those ideas that the rec department might put on. I think that'd be a great way to increase activities. And the whole idea in my mind is, high levels of depression and other mental health issues. One of the biggest things to help combat that is more activities that students can do with their peers to decrease that isolation. The other thing, we spoke with the school resource officer with the district, and that was a very enlightening conversation that we appreciated. That's what I have for that. And curriculum will meet tomorrow.
Are going to be on the team board?
We just had very preliminary discussions about it, so yeah.
Dana, I saw minutes for Birch Grove, if I'm correct.
Yeah, yes, it was actually a very short meeting. Obviously, you folks know that Katie Murray was our chair of the Birch Grove Building Committee, and Luluba was the town council lead. So Lou graciously stepped aside as the liaison, so Katie Murray can continue to be on the Birch Grove Building Committee to see that project through. So she's still there as the town council liaison. There's some final tasks that need to be done with the school before it can be closed out, and it's going to go into spring at minimum, just because we have to wait for the grass in the fields to continue and all that, the soccer field and the playground, everything's all established in the spring. If any of you guys have been to the site, the swing set has been installed. So they're going to be working on some seating and some handling the nature around the swing set to finish off that entire play ski. Other than that, it was fun change orders and updates to that. Small things like Promethean board, things that were getting replaced due to damage in shipment or delays. So it's just kind of like the small odds and ends that we're finishing up. And that's about it.
Perfect. Let's see, you said curriculum's meeting Thursday. FFC, do we have FFC? I didn't think so,
Oh,
right?
we meet next week.
Next week, okay. Anyone else that I'm missing? Or hold your peace? Or no, I think I got everybody. Okay. Chairperson's report. I just really wanted to just say that as we're entering into the budget season, I mean, ask questions. So even if you feel like they're silly, I mean, I know people make fun of us that we asked about postage, but postage equals a freshman sport. So ask the questions. It's fine. I mean, Jaden, this is your first time, Jen as well. Ask questions. Don't feel bad about asking. Dr. Willis just here kind of laughing because, we do have the direct link on there, and there are many times I'll just say, hey, by the way, XYZ, but next week are our discussions with the administrators. So I think that, I don't know how this is going to work this time. Do we discuss the logistics of that? Because
Structurally, you'll have an hour and a half, and we'll kind of do a brief kind of overview to get everybody acclimated, and then we will just kind of have you sort of break out to.
And we have
they're
an
all
in the
available
room
because
with
of COVID. They will be separate physically,
okay,
but you will be able to approach them, and in that time period, approach whom you would like to approach, ask the questions you would like, move to the people or persons you would like to talk to. So basically, board members will have the ability to stations that you would, but you'll be able to speak without, it'll be just you.
And it still end up being probably a couple of board members per group, but you
Yeah.
know, just ask the questions, you know, if you're going with someone and you don't have a question, just hear them talk, listen to the questions, and that might just spark another question that you would have. Because we, you know,
It'll probably ring a little bell like, hey, you know, now you could go to the next person, just to give you an idea of time. So you have a sense of, you know, how long you've been where you are. 3 different people.
excellent.
And
So
then the community, after that's all done,
we'll have the
then the
community. come in
community
and
will
ask
do the
their
same
questions,
thing.
which is perfectly fine. This way, just give the board members, because even for our public, you know, just having the questions, I think is really important to really look at that 4.94. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, they know, you know,
Yeah.
it's the program budgets, the things that you have before you, it'll be a great opportunity to say, you know, why do you need this? That type of thing.
that's really all I really wanted to say. And also, everyone, please just stay healthy. This is the time to just really make sure you have your vitamin C. So let's move on to the board action for the coronavirus relief fund. Dr. Willett, if you want to.
So I'll cue this up. Okay, so if you take a look at K1, just a general how we got here. November, the town council and board had a joint meeting, as you recall, part of the meeting was to discuss the CRF, the other was turf. The CRF was put in place at the rough outset of the pandemic. The idea was that, you know, given the circumstances, of the pandemic, the Board of Ed, you know, to use an example, may not be able to expend its funds, and because the board is limited to that, you know, statutory year, and it beyond the ERF really can't transfer funds beyond a year. CRF was made available for the Board of Ed to be able to, you know, have funds transferred into and then utilize them across the span of years, helping the district address the needs of the pandemic. And so it's been utilized for that purpose. You recall that in the meeting, there was a one-pager. The one-pager discussed how we got to the end of last year, you know, what the big chunks were that rolled over into the Jones General Fund. And a request was made to continue the CRF so that we could, and the one-pager articulated that we would be using this for the extended school year for general education students. In other words, summer school from July 5th, as well as the associate educators to support the kids that are quarantining and so on, and in isolation. So those were the 2 main areas where the funds would be used. In particular, those funds would be part of next fiscal year because July 5th to August 5th would be where most of that was occurred. And during the town council conversations on the matter after that meeting, there were some members that suggested adding a provision that was into the document that any remaining funds at the end of the year shall be used for COVID-related expenses incurred out of the general fund budget. And then part of the provision was, as I understand it, and it was explained, that the board would then replenish this with any remaining end of year funds that it might have at the end of a fiscal year. In this case, if we're using the example of fiscal year 23, utilize the funds for summer school, AKA extended school year, and then at the end of the year, funds would then go back into the CRF fund. So what would happen at the end of, say, fiscal year 23 in such a scenario, if there were funds remaining, is that the board could not request those funds go into the ERF. It would have to go to the CRF first, and then ultimately the ERF. So, you know, what is articulated in those 3 bullets, which is basically summarized with what I just said. The possible actions the board could continue or could consider for this situation are as follows, and they're listed in this item K1. You could authorize me to communicate to the town council chair that the board has no objection to the new language in E. You could authorize me to the town council chair that the Board of Education endorses the renewal of the Coronavirus Relief Fund in its original form with the exclusion of E. Or you could authorize the superintendent to request that, given that the funds were made available because of things the kids could not avail themselves of in that year, AKA transportation, special ed, certain other things, that a supplemental appropriation, instead of doing this whole CRF bit, instead of, trying to work around all that language, just ask, can we have a supplemental appropriation out of the general fund? Because those funds were rolled over and they exist, largely because of what was not spent, because we couldn't during that time on transportation and other things. Can you make a supplemental appropriation of 273,090? We can run the summer school extended school year from July 5th through August 5th. And that's included here because we do have the kids who have really suffered and continue to suffer with this in and out of school isolation quarantine stuff. That did impact us very profoundly last year, continues to impact us this year. And the extended school year is a great way of helping kids to adjust and to get something back from what they lost. We did have more than 320 kids participate. Otherwise, general ed population kids will not be able to participate. It'll only be special education students. So doing this and having this having this money either through the CRF or through that appropriation from the funds that were rolled over because of were unable to happen for these kids, making that happen for these kids is the way of making it up to them. And academically, it has some significant benefits. And general ed population students don't often get this opportunity. So, these three potential options are available to the board or something the board might come up with on its own.
Yeah, perfect. So at this point, we just need to have a board discussion as to thoughts are around this. Obviously, even just a small change of a verbiage like that can make a big difference in terms of when it's being used and not. So let's go ahead and Griffin.
Thank you, Ashley. So as far as this, from my perspective, I have no problem with the new wording as long as we can renew this fund for 2 years. So I would say that if the council is willing to renew the agreement for 2 years, if we kind of plan on, I believe it's 117 that we thought would be for the current year, and then 273 for fiscal year 23, I have no problem with the agreement. I just want to kind of have the 273 put aside if we do in fact need. That would be the way I'm kind of leaning. If the council is willing to renew the agreement for 2 years, I have no problem with the verbiage. Because I can totally understand where they're coming from with wanting to add that that verbiage into the new agreement. So that would be my thing. Dr. Willett, did we talk at all about renewing it then for 2 years?
Under the mid part, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth bullet down, what does the language change mean if approved? The middle bullet there talks about that it would be if we were going to do that it would be most useful if we renewed it for 2 years.
Did they give you any indication if they would be okay with that, or we haven't really talked to them any further after when their meeting that wanted to add the verbiage?
I didn't get the impression that they would be. I think at this point, they were just kind of lobbing it over to see if the board was amenable to E. But I don't think, I didn't perceive that they would, there would be a lot of resistance for it being 2 years. In particular, because, in order to really take advantage of this for summer school, it would have to be beyond this year.
Right.
Because we really need it for fiscal year 23 for the summer school. If that's, if the CRF was going to continue, that would be is, the CRF is really a convention of language because the board, the town council can do whatever it wants with end of year funds. So when the year ends and it becomes part of the general fund, it can largely do whatever it wants to do. So, supplemental appropriation outside of the CRF is another way of saying, well, if you're uncomfortable with, 390 or whatever, here's 273, can we just do summer school? So number of ways to go about it, but I think, I didn't get the perception that there would be an opposition to the 2-year piece because I think we could make an argument that, we really are asking for it to be used for summer school, which is next year.
Yeah, that would be my vote. I'm okay with that as long as it's the 2 years. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Florida.
Thank you, guys. I still have questions around the 2 years. I feel like this is now going to turn into another fund that is funded to keep things going that we don't necessarily, I don't want to say don't necessarily need anymore, but I don't see it as it being the most responsible way to move forward. So Griffin, on the 2 years, I just think, a COVID relief fund, it was established as an emergency fund. And like I said earlier, as we move into a more endemic state, I don't think we need a fund to, provide COVID relief. So I would be okay with the verbiage change E. Any remaining funds at the end of the year shall be used for COVID related expenses incurred out of the general fund budget as the council decides would vote on 1 year versus 2. I'm all set. Thank you, Ashley.
Now, here's my question. Now, say we go for this language, we wouldn't know that right off the bat that we have the funds for the associate educators that we're using currently right now during this year, correct?
Right, the associate educators.
Because we're using them for quarantines.
Right, we needed.
So that doesn't help us at all.
So, the 2 chunks that we're looking for from the 1-pager are the A's and the summer school. If this cannot extend beyond the end of this year, then it cannot be used for summer school. And one of our most, one of the biggest things that we need that is coronavirus, the pandemic, emergency related, the summer, ESY program for general ed kids. So, I think it just happens to be that, pandemic needs cross temporal lines. Budgets for boards are limited to 1 year at a time. So we don't have the flexibility to do it differently without the town's cooperation and help. It used to be back in 2018, the Educational Reserve Fund could be used, for something like this. When it became limited to special ed and capital, it made it so that we couldn't do something like this with it. So CRF, this way that they're doing it is the only way the board can achieve spending, into another year. So that would really be an important part of it, would be allowing us to, do it through, the end of fiscal year 23. Otherwise, can't use it for that ESY program, which, that's one of the main things that we're hoping to do. So that's the only bugaboo on that one. If we can't, it ends at the end of this year.
Because ultimately, when I'm looking at these and we're having this discussion, ultimately, the end goal is number 3 of getting the 273 somehow in order to pay for the summer school program and for educators, right?
Yeah.
So whether or not we have the coronavirus, we're looking for funds for the summer program.
We're gonna get to a point this year where we have to figure out how to make the thing work. And that may mean that, we may have to freeze things as we get towards the end, unless we're able to use the, CRF. Having said that, again, just as a kind of general statement, this is all just a convention of essentially CRF is a supplemental appropriation. And, they can do whatever they want with a supplemental appropriation. So if people are irked by the idea of the CRF and it continuing in some level of perpetuity, if that's an undesirable kind of thing for certain people, which, certainly understand all perspectives. Another way of handling it is saying to the council, hey, savings incurred in that prior fiscal year because of services kids could not have rendered to them. Can we have a supplemental appropriation, given that there was that amount of money rolled over, to specifically serve the general ed population, for this extended school year AK summer program, and ask just for a supplemental appropriation to achieve it. That is not a CRF convention. It doesn't have CRF around it. The council can either say yes or no. Because at the end of the day, that's what all of this is anyway. It's just another way of labeling this. So the council, that money is general fund money. And, if we want to do it without the label CRF, we do the third bullet here at the bottom and ask them for a supplemental for extended school year program from July 5th or August 5th because of the money that was rolled for services not rendered in that previous year.
Let's continue with this discussion. Like I said, I just been typing my little notes. Now, see, Jaden, you did it again. I was ready to call on you. Your hands down.
I did, but you're asking me so many great questions. Dr. Willett is answering him so fantastically that he's answering my questions. So it's they're clicking.
Great. Sophia?
I apologize that I wasn't able to log on last night. Dr. Willett, was there any opportunity for you to tell the council about the need for the summer school program and the up in the air possibility of how we're going to fund it?
Well, last night was strictly about the Miracle Field.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's right. Okay, so do they know this need for the summer school?
Yeah, when we had, I think November 29th, when we had that joint meeting, the CRF one pager articulated the need. And that's where that joint meeting, that's where we had that conversation. Subsequent to that was the feeling on a couple of council members' part to add, E. So yes, we did back on the 29th, that was the one pager.
Okay, I don't recall a big explanation of the need, but perhaps I missed it. I was just,
well, I think it got,
I guess by
the turf.
tell
field.
me, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the turf field was the star of the show that evening. But yeah, I guess of course, my concern, and I think is your concern and everyone's, is we need to get the summer school going and funded. And perhaps to the town council somehow, and how, if they have any suggestions on how to fund that, or how they would like to see it funded.
I mean, another option, because this is, again, just going out of the box a little here, but, the pandemic, endemic, this residual pain for us. Another option is, if you could ask that the ERF language, be provision for some type of use of this kind, for a summer, extended school year program. And then in perpetuity, it could be used for such things for Tolland students. That's another out of the box thing that wasn't put on this piece of paper, this virtual piece of paper here. So there's a couple of ways to skin the cat.
I think that's a great idea, because hopefully as years go on, less students will require summer school supplemental program. So it might dwindle, just like the CRF may as well.
One to the other point, though, this is a good opportunity to dovetail to the conversation that you were having previously. The ERF fund is a real tool that was provided by the state of Connecticut to allow towns to give their boards of ed the ability to carry over funds. We have up I think they allow up to 2%. And, you know, it doesn't always work out that way, but, you know, when we think about social emotional learning, we think about activities for kids, what helps them, you know, with respect to, you know, their welfare, programs that exist for, you know, after school, like we were talking about, and Mr. Murray was talking about, also could exist in the summer. And so, you know, if the ERF provision to extended school year program utilization, we would have yet another option to socially, emotionally support the children during that span of 2 months to 3 months where they really aren't or without it. You know, other than what, you know, falls to the families themselves in any typical day. And you know, there are a lot of haves, have nots. You know, there are some kids really don't have opportunities in the summer that some of the other kids have. So having that provision added to the would give some tremendous flexibility to the district to be able to provide awesome social, emotional, and academic programming for kids that might otherwise not have it, and the kids that are in the general ed population that are sometimes not given the opportunity because it's usually focused on special ed populations by IEP and need. So.
All set.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. Jacob?
I go back and forth up on this a little bit. I guess I'm closest to what Christine said. I'm fine with E, but it'd be nice to have it in place for 2 years. I can see what Dr. Willett's saying with amending the ERF. My concern with that though would be that's an ordinance, so we'd have to amend. You'd have to push them to amend the ordinance, which I think might be a bit more
I have
involved.
to ask them to do that.
Um,
Chap-
Yeah.
Yes, true.
Yeah, but if it sounds like the council might be amenable to having it for 2 years, I'd be okay with that. I agree with Christina's point that we need to be getting used to the virus being endemic, but I kind of see this as, you know, fighting the learning loss part of it, which is going to last several years, unfortunately. And this is a step to help combat that.
I mean, we are talking 320 kids that use that. That's a
School
big-
size of kids.
That's a lot of kids.
Plus it's general population, and sometimes they get left out,
Correct.
just because they don't have the same protections. You know,
These and 504s and.
the only other thing I would say is you may notice that as we go through this budget process, you may be turning to the ERF for a series of things to help stabilize the budget condition. So just keep in mind that, you know, as you move forward, plans on, you know, you may need or want to refund the ERF. You will not be able to refund the ERF as you know, effectively if the money first has to be earmarked for something else.
Mhm.
And if you're looking to the next year or two to use the ERF as a stabilizing tool, we might want to be careful about what we pledge to do at the end of the year that we have no idea to play.
Mhm.
You may want that money in the ERF. So again, you might want to make the supplemental ask, you know?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, that to me is like if it's the verbiage of A or B or C or D. At the end of the day, we're looking to have the supplemental appropriation, whether it's under, you know, the CRF or just calling it a supplemental appropriation in order to have the associate educator, which is what we need. So to me, I'm almost just gonna say, because I feel like with either option A or B, like we're still would like to have, whether it's 2 years or, you know, 1 year versus just saying exactly what we need. Hey, this is the money that we need. $273,090. So I don't know. I'm kind of leaning toward just 3 and just saying this is what we need. Just forget about the 1 year. I just it's a hard. I mean, the whole thing is we need to get the summer program up and going for this year, and we need to be able to afford the associate educators that we're using currently for everything. So I don't know. That's kind of where my head is at. So just call it for what it is. Let's just ask for a supplemental appropriation and just don't even worry about the verbiage for the Sierra. But go ahead, Griffin.
So my only concern is we've already got the CRF sort of agreed upon. We've kind of come this far with it, so I would kind of like us to continue with it with just this stipulation, you know, kind of we take their verbiage, they take our extra year. Because at the end of the day, if they say no to this completely, we're going to have to build in summer school into this budget that Dr. So we're already at 5.84%. I mean, adding another 273,000, I'm sorry, I did not do the math. But, you know, at the end of the day, summer school is going to have to happen. So I don't want to see us have to put it in the fiscal year 23 budget that we just got. And then as a result, we are then possibly taking away something else that the teachers and the administration and Dr. Willett needed to be in this budget. So I just kind of want to remind everybody that I don't think if summer school is something that is an absolute must have, then I think the CRF is the first try to get that to be approved. I just think personally, I just think that that's a better, you know, way to go at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Any other board members? Because I definitely don't feel like we're any vote of any kind.
I mean, you can percolate on it for the next time if you wanted to, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't feel like, I mean, we still have a couple of board members who haven't said anything, and you know, obviously, if you know the option A, there's either, you know, looking for the 1 year or 2 years out. I mean, I would assume that maybe it would have to be an agreement of 2 years, and if we don't need it in the 2 years, then with the new verbiage would end up just going into the general fund, or, you know, having it, because this CRF would be number one, that would have to be replenished, right? So if we did that verbiage in that second year, then we wouldn't need it, then it wouldn't, there would be no funds directed to it. I do think that we're probably, you know, I already feel like now we're in January and look at all, we have a lot of these quarantines and stuff, so I don't know what holds us, but we're in January now, and we definitely need to have summer school. So how are we gonna make that happen? And I do see Griffin's part of, you know, if we just do the appropriation, then, you know, we can't add any more to this budget. I mean, you have it at 4.94. Let's just call it a 5. I mean, you can round it down to that, but it's just, you know, there's a lot of wheels on this of how we're going to support our some, you know, we have a couple of other hands, so yeah, I just don't know that we're anywhere close to being in that space of voting on any of these ones that we have. So, Dana?
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, I appreciate Sophia bringing up the ESY, because I think that definitely is a huge topic of conversation, and I definitely think we need to highlight that in our town council. You know, when we initially went into quarantine, we were sent home for 2 weeks, if you guys recall. March of 2020, it was 2 weeks, and now here we're 2 years later. I definitely think that it would be paramount for us to continue to have this fund for, you know, as long as we can continue to get it and need it for things such as ESY, things such as social emotional health services. And Jen and Jaden brought up the lunches at, I think it's TIS, that there's only 2 students. And if you're with a student that is in quarantine or out of school for whatever reason, now you're a student sitting by yourself. So there's a lot of things behind the scenes that are happening that we're going to continue to their need to focus with our students and our staff. You know, as we come through this and hopefully come out of this, years of I don't want us to call it repair, that's a really bad word, but how many years of additional assistance are we going to need for our students? Are we going to need 1 year? Are we going to need 5 years? Are we going to need their entire career through high school? I mean, our kindergarten students are 2 years ago, so our second graders so far have not had a normal year of school. You put it in perspective, right? They went kindergarten. They had the weird year last year and now this year. So there is, and those are their youngest minds are that's such a developmental time period. So I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that I don't think ESY is just going to be this summer or next summer or the following summer. And I would defer that question to you, Dr. Willett, because I really think that, you know, some of the educational studies that I've read, it's 5-10 years or more even of assisting these students to get to where they on a multitude of aspects, you know, educationally and socially, emotionally. The social emotional health is paramount so that they can continue to absorb the educational, the lessons learned. I will say the feedback of ESY from parents and families that had never had the opportunity to go were phenomenal. And what those students were able to engage in was a huge success for I'd be advocating for as long as we can continue this fund as needed, because we just don't, I don't know when the end is. I hope it's soon, but I mean, ultimately, none of us have a crystal ball. Again, we were home for 2 weeks originally. so that's what I have to say, but I don't know, Dr. Willett, if you have any studies or any information that you can provide or enlighten us with, you know, some of the ramifications of what's been going on educationally and social emotionally that would need to continue, as well as other counseling services and such.
I think ESY is going to be very important for general ed, I mean, special ed it always is, but for the general ed population this coming summer. And people did avail themselves of it, you know, 320 some odd did avail themselves of it, and I think would again. If I'm being totally frank, I get worried about language that tethers you to a course of action that could be, you know, months or years out, like a year out. And so the only issue I have with E is that it tethers your actions to this. To Ms. Plord's point, if at the end of fiscal year 23 there is no longer a need for a coronavirus relief fund, you've pledged your end of year roll maybe back to this fund that you may no longer have a use for fiscal year 24. And that would be in lieu of the ERF. So the issue at hand is not necessarily the need for the funds, because we say, you know, there was a significant savings from last year into the coming year because of a lot of things that we were not spending for these students because of the pandemic. There's a clear need for the ESY for next year. You know, it just asked for a supplemental appropriation for that need because of the money that was rolled, and just jettison the CRF as language, because again, it's a convention of language. The town does not have to do anything differently when it becomes general fund money. But what ends up happening here with E is you're tethering yourself to a course of action. And let's think, you know, if we're thinking about fiscal year 24, you're tethering a future of action potentially, you know, and then there are some questions about that, even from a year-to-year financial standpoint, about the authority under Title 10 of a board to do that. So, you know, because we're talking a lot about it, I'm just going to throw it out there that, you know, it's that piece that we don't know. We don't know what the end of fiscal year 24 looks like. You know, you don't know what the end of fiscal year 23 looks like. So, you know, to say, you know, to have your actions tethered to this course of action without, you know, that's what's happening here. You have to replenish. So it is a strings attached situation at this point, and it didn't used to be. And that's the thing that you might have to percolate on a little bit or think about, is that, you know, when you get to the end of the year, you're pledging to do this course of action. And it has a string attached to it. And if it's not needed in fiscal year 24, you've already technically pledged. So that's why supplemental appropriation might be the cleanest way to do this. Hey, there was this money that was not expended. Hey, it rolled over to the general fund and it's, you know, added to the general fund. Hey, can we use it for the summer school ESY for some, July 5th to August 5th. Council can either say, yep, that did roll over, it's available, you can use it, or nope, you can't. And then that answer, that's it. The answer is provided, Otherwise, if you go with you are agreeing to a course of action. You're agreeing to a future, you're writing a check for the future if there are money, if that money is available. You're pledging it back to the CRF, whether that CRF is even needed.
A lot of stuff. Let's go down the line. Clerk?
All right, so correct me if I'm wrong. The town council had a public hearing for the CRF on the 28th, which was my birthday, so I apologize for not being on. Would they, if we changed anything they talked about, they would have to have another public hearing if we don't this first possible action. Is that correct?
They decided not to actually go through with the public hearing in its totality because they had not received any, the board had not had an opportunity yet to discuss it. So the public hearing is put in the future, maybe at their later January meeting. They did not go forward with the public hearing per se. They put that off until after about it tonight.
Okay, so are they expecting a vote from us tonight so they can move forward?
Well, I think they're expecting your feedback tonight, or at least
Okay.
to where you're at. Again, it's up to you whether you're not bound to do anything in particular here. You can say that you need another meeting to examine it. That's not going to kill us in terms of BSY because that would still be January, February. We would have time. So if you feel pressured tonight, you still have some time to consider it. But that was what they were doing, was balancing it so that they would then revisit this in their later January meeting. You can say you need another meeting if you wanted to, I suppose. They said that the urgency they were acting on it with was because the board had expressed urgency. But I think back at the fall fell the way it did. They were having it at the end of December because of the urgency that was expressed by the board. But I think the board's urgency began many months before that too. It's just how everything felt. So
So I guess it's under board action. I mean, would the chair entertain one of the motions? We could see, happy to make the first one. We could see if it fails or passes.
I think we're gonna continue on because Tony didn't even get a chance to talk first, and I think it's important to have board members talk before we go into a motion. So, like I said, Tony didn't get a chance to weigh in.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to say, I support the idea, of voting on one of the options tonight. I think, we did come forward with a sense of urgency, whether that was justified or not. We did. We pushed it to the council and they responded. I think I like option 3, personally the best. I think it's cleanest. While I understand what Ms. Griffin's saying as far as the fund and bringing it forward, we stepped forward and said that this is what we want to use it for. I mean, that one pager that we listed those items. So since we know what it is, I think the council might respond favorably to us being very clear, this is what we want to spend the money for and how. Thank you.
And I'm kind of with you, Tony, on that because I feel like if we're changing the language, I mean, I would be fine keeping it as is if we know that we can use our funds to get the summer program, get the associate education. Just leave it as is. There are some things about the tethering with the strings attached. If we can't use those funds further down the line, or we already use those funds to move it. I just want to know that everything's going to be paid now with what we have. So I do think that that's an interesting position. So it is It's a lot. Jaden, you haven't had a chance.
No, I just have a quick question. So I'm looking at this through the eyes, obviously, as a new member, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm confused because on the agenda, it obviously just says K1 coronavirus relief fund, but it doesn't tell. I've been listening. I've been trying to look up, on dashboard, on this, on that, like what exactly the three options are, and I'm severely confused. And so I'm just curious. Option 2. Option 3, laid out sort of in front of, and Jen, I don't know if you're feeling the same way. I just know, not having seen all of this before, I'm a little, whoa. So whatever that means.
Dr. Will, sometimes you go off on a little bit more tangents than need be. So number 1 is keeping it exactly as is. Adding authorize language E added to. So number 1 is adding E, which is the red line. That's any remaining funds at the end of the year shall be used for the COVID-related expenses incurred out of the general fund budget. So essentially, whatever we have left over, like we had a lot last year due to the buses, during that joint meeting, that one pager kind of had where we got all the extra funds. We would be using any extra funds to replenish prior to the ERF or anything out of that. Number 2 is leaving it as is for normal and keep it as status quo, excluding the E. So we're not doing any changes to the CRF, and stays as is. Now, number 3 is something completely out of the box of saying, let's not even worry about the CRF funds. We're going to request the supplemental appropriation saying that we need to get that $273,090 so that we can fund the associate educators and the summer program happening this summer. So I think that's kind of boils it down, right?
I'd say so.
I'm not like messing anything. That's kind of.
No, just the only clarification I'll make is the CRF technically doesn't exist. You're asking them.
Correct. The CRF does not exist.
To read.
Okay.
So
So
with the condition of E, the way it used to be, or supplemental appropriation.
correct. Did you hear that, Jaden? And did that?
I
Okay.
did. Thank you very much, Ashley. I appreciate it.
Okay. Let's go to Jen. So we haven't heard from you.
I hate belaboring this, but I'm where Jaden is. So you may have gotten me a step closer. So we need anything. And if we leave it as is, I think I liked what you said, Ashley, is like, I either want to leave it as is and have the associate educators paid for and summer school paid for, or I just ask for the associate educators and the end of school year, the ESY to be paid for. Sorry, I'm tired. So learn that if we just leave it as is and we don't put in this language, what Christine kind of said, that they could say no, and then we wouldn't have anything that we need.
So the second page of this item is the original, technically most of the original language of the CRF. The CRF ended in June. The three things, what's out there is, could you continue it with its original language, meaning, you can use the end of year funds without any condition. That's one. Or two, we accept your condition E that we'll pay it back. Or three, forget the CRF. Can we just have a supplemental appropriation for summer school? The CRF expired already. So we're saying, hey, because we were chaos, just continue it, as it was originally stated, and we want to use the money as we dictated, asked for in the one pager, which is linked there. That would be one of the asks. Hey, can we just, continue the CRF? Can you agree to continue it? Let us use it for summer school and the associate educators. Some of them said we, want to put E on that, which is the condition. And you can say, sure, we'll do that if you'll renew it, or ask for the appropriation. But it doesn't technically exist now because it expired. So we're just asking them to continue it as it was. We agree to continue it with E, or we ask for a supplemental appropriation. And you really don't have any authority here to do any of this, you know, this is general fund money at this point. The thing about this that's really something hard is this is a convention of language. It's a supplemental appropriation no matter how you split it. So do you want a supplemental appropriation with a condition? Or do you want to ask for a supplemental appropriation without a condition? Do you want to accept E and say, sure, we'll pay it back at the end of each fiscal year? You know, or do you want to say, you know, we don't want to pledge at the end of a fiscal year that we're not sure we're going to need in the next year, and we just have a supplemental appropriation this summer? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess, given that, from what I understand, to be blunt, I feel like it seems like we're mostly all on the same page in that we understand that we need to have ESY, we need our associate educators. I understand we're a little bit torn on whether or not 1 year, 2 year, like was stated, it is, you know, there is a certain guarantee in it. I almost feel like, well, I feel like my stance would be, I think it should continue the way that it's been. And I just can't imagine it not being approved under the circumstances that our children clearly need these things and understand the need for a change in language or to put a different level of control on something that clearly our students need. I don't know, that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Let's go, Court.
I just wanted to make a point of order. I think when we're under board action that it's expected that the board have action. So we have 3 potential motions and one could be made and go around that. I mean, we had all the information in the superintendent's agenda item background. So I would like to make a motion to authorize the superintendent to communicate to the town council chair that the Board of Education has no objection to the new language E being added to the coronavirus relief fund language.
And that says, and not having the 2-year, 1-year addition.
As it stands. Wants to second it, that's cool. And if there's no second, it fails.
And if you want to, you know, if it does fail, you can add that same language and add and continue for 2 years. You know what I mean? That would be another
that's
way
fine.
to modify
Yeah,
it.
no, I have no problem because we can rule things out too. So is there a second for that?
Tony Holt, I'll second that.
Okay. Any other discussion before we vote on option 1? Roll call vote. So Jacob?
This is without the 2-year,
Correct. This is
Okay.
just as is as number 1.
nay.
Okay. Plort?
Aye.
Griffin?
Nay.
Galichet?
Nay.
Jaden?
I'm going to be a nay.
Okay. Tony?
Hey,
Was that a yay or an A?
negative, nay.
Negative. We just got to, it sounded the same in here. We were all looking at each other. Okay, Dana?
Nay.
Okay, Sophia?
Nay.
Okay, nay, and I'm a nay as well. Therefore, we can go to the second one. If anyone wants to entertain, I'll entertain a motion if you want to make a,
Can you entertain the motion as chair?
I'm entertaining a motion of saying, if you want to make a motion.
Okay. To see I might make this one with a 2-year. I've moved to authorize the superintendent to communicate to the town council chair that the Board of Education has no objection to the new added to the coronavirus relief fund language, provided that the council agree to continue the COVID relief fund for 2 fiscal years.
Tony Holt, second.
Okay, any discussion? So this is basically the first one, adding in the 2-year fiscal change. Okay, let's go ahead and vote. Jacob?
Aye.
Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry, Ashley, did you say that add the 2 years? I missed that.
Here's number 1.
Yeah, it's 1 with the 2 years.
Yep, so the. option
Oh,
number
okay.
years.
Number 1 with the 2 years. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Flor?
Aye.
Okay, Griffin?
Aye.
Jen?
Nay.
Hayden?
This will be a nay from me.
Tony?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Dana?
Nay.
Sophia?
Nay.
And I'm actually a nay as well. One also does not pass. Now, can we do a motion for the middle one, the second option? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to authorize the superintendent to communicate to the town council chair that the Board of Education endorses the renewal of the coronavirus relief fund in its original form prior to and excluding the addition of.
So this is just for, as it stands, keep it as is. Do we have a second?
Are we having a discussion?
After we get a second, we can have a discussion. But if we don't have a second, then. we're-
Jaden registered, I'll second it.
Okay, so now we can have a discussion. Anything about the motion before we vote? Yep, Christina?
Keep an eye on time, you might need to push it past.
Okay. Go ahead, Griffin.
So I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly and that everybody else understands this correctly. If we vote for number 2 as is, because summer school is in the next fiscal year, we'd have to go through this all again a year from now. We are not guaranteeing that 273. So that 273,000 would automatically get put back to the town if we don't use it in fiscal year 22. So I just want to make sure everybody kind of understands that for motion 2.
Yeah, I mean, if it really is going to continue as it was written, you and the council will have a conversation in, what is it, June, July, August, or September to continue to the fiscal year 23.
Right,
You know,
but
you're
the funds
saying-
won't be, those
Because
funds
you-
aren't going to be in it anymore at that
But
point.
they would, yeah, what they would be doing would be if they said, okay, the board wants to continue it as it is, and we will continue it as it is, then we would probably be asking at the end of this year for the associate educator dollars, and that's what would happen at the end of this year. And you would have a conversation with them June, July, and September about continuing it to fiscal year 23. That's how this would play if it was exactly the same. If you added a 2-year provision to this line, then you wouldn't necessarily have to have that conversation in June, July, August, or September. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of this year, you would ask if that is what they say, they will do, is continue the CRF through this year. At the end of the year, I can see us saying we would like to have the associate educators, and would replenish that. And then you'd be talking to them about whether you would continue it into fiscal year 23, unless you did the same motion with an add of 2 years. Does that make sense?
For the 2 years. But right now, we do not have that in there for the 2-year.
Right now, you get to the end of this year, You talked about what we spent, and you replenish that, and you'd have a conversation with them.
Yeah, Jacob,
Christine Dunn.
I believe so. Chris, anything else?
Nope, sorry, that's it.
I guess I prefer, I just want to say, I prefer this over to motion 3 for just 2 reasons. One, it is already in stone, like Ms. Griffin said, as far as what the agreement would look like. I don't know if the council might add other stipulations if we just asked for a supplemental appropriation. It's possible that they might, whereas this seems like it's a little bit more. The other thing is the way the fund is written. If we did ask to try to put it in for a couple of years, we do have a little bit of flexibility as to how we could use that money as it comes before the board and we have a decision to vote on it. So in 2 years, if there's something in additional with summer school or we decide we need to change our strategy, we might be able to do that. Which brings me to my next point with Dr. Willett is, do you think there's a chance we kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak, and just ask for the renewal now for 2 years, or?
That could be a modification or an
Okay,
adjustment to that motion, yes.
okay.
The other thing to keep in mind is if this did, let's say got rolled as is,
Mhm.
and the money is allocated to it, which would be the 390 or whatever.
Yeah,
Anything not used goes to the ERF if it's not used in its current language, up to the 1%.
yeah,
This was a no-brainer for the board in the past, was whether it's used for coronavirus or not, what's left rolls to your ERF. So if that's true for the end of this year and the allocation of 390 is made, whatever's not used goes straight to your ERF, you know, as per the language as it exists right now.
yeah.
So, you know,
I mean, you do make a good point, because I was leaning toward 3 and just calling it for what it is, but you are right, there could be additional stipulations just in asking for a supplemental appropriation, so.
Yeah, I don't know for
I
sure, but
didn't
it's
think,
possible.
I didn't think
Yeah.
about that, but so that, yeah, that it is a good point. So at this point, though, we are going to be voting on it as is with no renewal for 2 years, because that is not an amendment for this motion. The motion is just to authorize the superintendent to communicate the town council chair that the Board of Education endorses the renewal of the coronavirus relief fund in its original and excluding the addition of E. So at this point, if there's no other discussion, then I will do a roll call vote. So any further discussion? Okay, we look good. Oh, Dana?
I put my hand up and then I put it down. I just want to make sure everybody's clear that, so we can make like a 4th option this evening based on results. And so I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. So we can have the caveat of option 2 with the 2-year addendum. I just want to make sure, this is just a lot of options, a lot of confusion. I just want to make sure that that's where we're at.
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, thank you.
Make it clear that this does not include the
Yep.
2 years.
But we still have the option to make a 4th option is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Okay, yep, cool. Thank you. I'm good.
So let's go ahead and do a roll call vote. Jacob?
In that case, I'll do nay.
Nay. Dana?
Took me off guard. Nay.
Griffin?
Nay.
Lord?
Nay.
Jen?
Nay.
Jaden?
Nay.
Tony?
Nay.
Sophia?
Nay.
And I'm a nay as well, therefore that motion really fails. Okay, let's continue on. So we can do a new motion. I'll entertain a new motion for that, including a request for a renewal in 2 years. So it covers 2 years.
2-year duration.
2-year duration. There you go.
I move superintendent to communicate to the town council chair that the Board of Education endorses the renewal of the coronavirus relief fund in its original form prior to and excluding the addition of E for 2 years.
Okay.
Jen Gallichan, second.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this for the 2-year addition onto our option 4, option 4? No discussion, okay. Jacob,
Aye.
Dana,
Aye.
Griffin,
Aye.
Ford,
Nay.
Galichet,
Aye.
Jaden,
Aye.
Tony,
Nay.
Sophia?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. This motion passes. Therefore, Dr. Willett, we will be authorizing you to communicate with the town council chair that the Board of Education endorses the renewal relief fund in its original form prior to and excluding the addition of E for the duration of 2 years. Okay. I will say, entertain a motion to go beyond 10 because we still have public participation to attend. Do I have a second on that?
Jaden Redford, I will second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? No, we will do a roll call vote. So Jacob,
Aye.
we have Griffin,
Aye.
Ford,
Nay.
I'm an aye.
Galichet,
would be interesting.
Aye.
Sophia,
Aye.
Dina,
Aye.
Tony. My whole screen gets messed up.
Aye.
I am an aye as well, therefore we will go beyond 10 o'clock, hopefully not too much longer than 10 o'clock. But let's open this up to the public participation. If you could please raise your hand and name and address for the record. Dr. Willett has a fancy timer over here, so you'll be allotted 2 minutes. And we will start if anyone wants to raise their hand. Okay, see, you take out the timer and everybody says, no, I don't want to talk. Okay, going once, going twice. I didn't even have to motion for 10 o'clock, so let's continue on. Up again to points of information for any board members. If they have anything that they would like to say at this time, please raise your hand. Good. Okay, Jen?
I just want to thank everybody tonight for your patience with me as I tried to figure stuff out and ask questions. So I really appreciate it from all of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's difficult stuff, so.
I would like to reciprocate exactly what Jen just said. Thank you. There, it got a little confusing there at a certain point, but I saw people smiling and laughing, so I do appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we don't really have the future or new business, so I will entertain a motion for adjournment at, what is it, 10 o'clock on the dot.
So moved.
Jaden Red,
No discussion, let's go ahead and vote.
Aye.
Jaden,
aye.
I didn't hear it. Guys, hi, Jen.
Oh, aye. Sorry.
Griffin,
Aye.
Laura,
Aye.
Sophia.
Aye.
She said aye. Dana,
Aye.
this is the longest vote. We're leaving.
Take it out of here. Let's just-
Okay, I'm a aye as well. Have a great night, everybody.
Drive safe.